Inside Utah Politics.
Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Glenn Mills. It is time to go inside Utah politics. We do begin this morning with Salt Lake County Clerk Sherrie Swensen, here to discuss 32 years in office. That is just amazing. 32 years. What do you think of when you think about that number?
I am kind of amazed at how quickly it has gone. I think of all the changes that came about and the progress we've made, and I'm very gratified.
We will dig more into that. As you now come down to the very end, you're wrapping things up on your long career, what goes through your mind as you're about ready to say goodbye?
I feel like we're at such a good place in the office of the county clerk, the elections, marriage, passport, council clerks, that I feel comfortable that the things that are in place will proceed and be carried on, and that was always my goal. I didn't want to see things slide backwards.
You were the clerk in my first election. You were the clerk when I got my marriage license. You're the only clerk in Salt Lake County I've known. That goes for a lot of people here in the area. When you took a look at saying now is the time to go ahead and move on, what played into that?
You know, honestly, I started thinking about how many years I have left, and unfortunately, darn it, we have to age. And so it was partly that, just that, you know, the time, the horrendous hours, sitting at a computer so many hours a day, responding to emails and doing the work that the clerk's office needs to do, it did play into it.
Horrendous hours? I mean, I was only texting you at midnight. What's wrong with that?
Yeah, I mean, I felt like voters and customers needed the service, and so I was answering a lot of emails, whether it was long hours, late nights, weekends, and I just feel like that's the way the job needed to be done.
Let's talk a little bit about the climate right now, because obviously it's a big part of the story. We have 17 of the 29 clerks in Utah turning over this year. I have to assume that a lot of that, in fact I know it is from some of them I've talked to, that a lot of those decisions are being made on the climate that we're currently seeing. First off, talk about what kind of toll that takes on you as a clerk and your workers, and what you are seeing right now in this very moment.
You know, it was difficult to try to convince people that there isn't fraud with vote by mail and some of the rhetoric that's been spewed out, and disheartening that people would accuse, especially all of the staff, the poll workers who work tirelessly to make sure everything is done correctly. It's difficult to be in that climate, but I feel like, you know, people need to be able to ask questions, and that's fine. But we spent a lot of time answering some of the allegations that were not based on any real information.
A lot of clerks, including yourself, were willing to answer questions, invite people in to see the process. Did you see minds changing when you were able to do that?
Yes, I really felt like it was productive. I mean, all the countless hours I spent answering emails explaining how when ballots are sent out to a voter, they have a unique 9-digit ID number correlated to the voter in the registration database, and that the ballots cannot be injected into our system that are made in China or in someone's living room. I felt like it was rewarding, and people did thank me and say, we appreciate this information. The tours that we conducted for countless organizations and individuals, when they saw our process, they realized it was secure.
Talk about the curing process a little bit, just to add on to that, how it worked. I know one of my sons had to actually go through that process, but that's what it's all about, is try to make sure that those ballots are legitimate.
Yes, so for every vote by mail ballot that is returned, there's an affidavit on the return envelope, and it has to be signed by the voter. And so with that, there's a signature comparison to the signature that we have on record for that voter. And much of that is done through a software program that's used by financial institutions, but if it can't be done by the software, we have individuals then that are trained, and they look at the signatures and do signature comparison. If the signature, after looking at numerous documents that we might have in our system for that voter, if it can't be matched, we send a cure letter to the voter and give them an opportunity to sign an affidavit, provide some important information identifying them, and so their ballot can be counted.
I mentioned my first election. And you take a look from that time to now, and the election process has really evolved. Talk about that and what you see as either the good or bad from that.
Oh, I think we have made tremendous progress. So when I was able to, as a county clerk, offer a permanent absentee program, which was an opt-in where voters could sign to receive their ballot by mail, we grew that number. People saying this is convenient, we like it, as opposed to where they used to have to go to a traditional polling place at a certain location. Their name would be on the register at that polling place. If they got to the wrong place, they had to get to the right place. And that was so difficult. But so the opt-in absentee permanent vote by mail was excellent. However, then the legislators saw the wisdom and how the turnout was better, and they allowed us to conduct our elections by mail. That transition was amazing because we can now mail a ballot to every active registered voter automatically, and they can choose to either vote that ballot, or we also have the generic vote centers, which were not the case when I came into office. With the new system, we were able to offer generic vote centers, so regardless of where a person resides in the county, they can go to any one of the vote centers. We also had a law change that introduced early voting, and so that came about. So the conveniences that people have to be able to cast their ballot and be empowered to vote are just amazing. It's a great change.
It really skyrocketed turnout as well. Talk about turnout, average numbers you would see before we got to this point and what we have seen the last few cycles.
So the first few elections we conducted, and I do contract services for the municipal elections. It's not my statutory duty. And the first two that came on board, for instance, were West Jordan and Cottonwood Heights. And the number in that vote by mail election when they opted to allow us to conduct their election by mail was 2.5 to 3 times greater than what it had been in a comparable election. The number of voters who've turned out, for instance, in the 2020 general presidential election.
I think that's the highest I've seen.
It is, by far. Of a record number of registered voters, we had about 100,000 more voters than we did even in 2016. And then in 2020, the turnout was over 90% in Salt Lake County, which is phenomenal.
What are you most proud of as you look back at your time in office?
I'm very proud that we've made it so convenient and accessible for people to register to vote. I mean, when I came into office, there was no internet. I had to go out and do,
think about that for a minute, right?
In-person registration. I went to high schools, senior centers, boat shows, autoramas, anywhere I could get in to try to encourage people to register to vote. There wasn't an online registration tool. So my office actually developed an online tool, and the Lieutenant Governor's office picked it up where they, instead of having to have a person print it off and mail in the application, they were able to capture the signature from the driver's license. And I know Utah was the first state that had an online voter registration. That made a huge difference. And then as well as the vote by mail and the early voting, the generic vote centers, I'm very, very proud of that because I really feel that now if someone wants to participate and vote, that they can do so conveniently. And it isn't about them trying to figure out where to go and how to find out.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to work with you over the years. You've been on this show many times. I've come out to your place on Election Day many times, and I've always appreciated that you have been transparent with me from a media standpoint. So best of luck to you as you move on.
Thank you.
You bet. Still to come.